Greetings and welcome to the Halloween edition of the Sliders Review. And I'm here today to talk to you about Scooby-Doo, the 2002 live action movie. So I was ecstatic when this movie came out because I was a huge Scooby-Doo fan from back in the day. You know, I watched the original series that came out in '79. I watched some of the '80s stuff. I watched a pup named Scooby-Doo. I love Scooby-Doo. So the fact that it was getting the live action treatment, I was ecstatic. And what was even cooler was that I recognized all of the stars that was in the movie. Sarah Michelle Gellar, who I had a huge crush on back in the '90s because of Buffy. Linda Carlini from Freaks and Geeks. There's Freddie Prinze Jr., who was in I Know What You Did Last Summer, and Matthew Lillard, who was in the Scream franchise in 13 Ghosts. And so, it also stars that of, what's his name? Rowan Alkins, the dude from the Beans movies and stuff. And it also stars that of Miguel A. Nunez Jr., who is just legendary himself. I remember he was in a show called Sparks. It also starred a couple of other people that I did not recognize, like newcomer Isla Fisher. And so, yeah. And the fact that so many of the characters look just like themselves from the cartoons was insane. Matthew Lillard, the dude is Shaggy. You know what I'm saying? You can't deny it. And Linda Carlini, she looks just like Velma, except for her hair is a little too shaggy. But, I get it because, from the 70s, 80s, stuff like that. And so, Freddie Prinze Jr., when he's a blonde, he looks just like Zach Morris. Now, his first hairstyle from the early beginning of the movie, I didn't like. But when he cut it, I liked that one a whole lot. But then he went back to that shaggier hairstyle in the second movie for some bizarre reason. And then there's Sarah Michelle Gellar, which I just see Buffy with the red hair. I honestly do. I love myself some Sarah Michelle Gellar, but I just see Buffy. And the characters, man, they really try to bring on the mannerisms of the characters. Matthew Lillard, the dude is really a live action Shaggy. He said he even tried to walk like him. I can't really see the walk too much, but I remember in the making of it, he said he did. Linda as Velma, man, she is the truest of the truest Velmas, except for she didn't carry everybody on her shoulders. But then there is Fred and Daphne from Freddy and Sarah. Those two, the two most removed from their characters. They didn't act like their cartoon counterparts. They pretty much reinvented their characters for the movie. Daphne was more whiny, and she did martial arts and everything. And she was very headstrong, which because the Daphne in the original cartoon series, there wasn't much to her. The only reason why people like her is because she was hot. Other than that, her character never did nothing but fall down and get caught. So I understand why they reinvented her, but why did they have to make her so Buffy-ish? You know what I'm saying? Now the whining part, that was taken from a pup named Scooby-Doo, so I like that. But then there is Fred. And his character didn't act nothing like, his cartoon counterpart. It's just he acted a little bit more like the Fred from a pup named Scooby-Doo, just a little bit, because, he's a slightly that's I don't know, the pup named Scooby-Doo one was just stupid and always blaming folks. But this one, he wasn't so much stupid, he was slightly aloof and everything. But he was cocky and arrogant. and self-centered, which Fred has never acted like that. So I'm not sure why they tried to like, reinvent his character. But I do remember in the original, Fred was just kind of like a blank slate. He was just there to like, okay, gang, let's look for clues, and that's about it. And he commanded everything. Other than that, I guess they had to give him a personality. So, but why they had to give him a cocky one? Well, then again, that's James Gunn, 'cause he's the one who wrote this movie. And because of this, it reinvigorated Scooby-Doo. So they came out with like a cartoon series, and in like the 2000s, a cartoon series I still have not seen yet. The one that was on Cartoon Network that tried to emulate that of the movie a little bit. I think that Fred was a little bit more cockier in that cartoon series, and Daphne, she was more headstrong and did martial arts, I remember from the clips I saw. But I've never actually seen that cartoon series. I started to watch it earlier this year, but then I stopped. And so, sorry about that, my camera died. But yeah, James Gunn, of all people, wrote this movie, and he wrote it a whole lot more R-rated than what we saw in the PG rating. And Warner Brothers is the one who made this movie. It was filmed in Australia, so a lot of like the background characters are like Australian and from New Zealand. And so, yeah, this movie is very, very colorful and bright. Like, you think James Gunn directed this because of the way it looks and everything, but it's not. And so, like, yeah, a director named Raja is it Gosnell? He's the one who directed this movie and the second one, and it's very colorful and stuff, which is interesting because like the original series was never brightly colored. It always had like a muted, dingy palette because they were always walking around at night. But a lot of this movie is actually filmed in the day, which is interesting. Because that's complete 180 from that of like Scooby-Doo. This fits more in line with a pup named Scooby-Doo that was always filmed in like the daytime and stuff, the daytime setting. And so I'm not quite sure why they constantly went with the day setting and everything. It could be because of the test audience. And I'll get into that a little bit later because James Gunn went all James Gunn and everything. Oh boy, I swear about that, man. You can't trust people with beady eyes, I'm telling you. And so, like, yeah. I'm trying to think who was the voice of Scooby in this. I know Scott Ians, he returned as Scrappy-Doo. But I think Neil Fanley, he was the voice of Scooby-Doo. And he did an amazing job. He's a stunt actor of all things, an Australian one. I wish he would come back for all the animated stuff because I prefer his voice than the other guy. Even though I do respect the other guy who plays Fred, I just prefer his a whole lot better. Scooby-Doo actually looks very different in this movie. Like, they redesigned his face just slightly to where it does not resemble the old cartoon character. And I don't know if it resembles that of a real dog or whatever, but it doesn't really look like Scooby. It looks more like a live action treatment redesign. Not only that, but he doesn't have the right color. He's light brown. And the CGI on him is pretty good, but the thing is, he needs more rendering at times because he kind of stands out at times because of his brightness. And if you look at the Cartoon Network live action movies, that Scooby-Doo looks more like the real Scooby-Doo and the real color. So I'm not sure why they went with a lighter shade of brown. And we do get to see the mystery van for like a short period in time. But like, this movie, I remember when this movie came out, I originally loved it. And I watched it over and over. But then I got annoyed by it because, like, I think my nieces and nephews wanted to watch it over and over and over and over again. So I got like too saturated with it, like Lilo and Stitch. And so I'm just like, I'm getting rid of this movie. And I got rid of the movie. Until years later, I'm like, man, I missed this movie. So I rebought it again. And I got a better deal, kind of, because I got the 2-pack. With this one and Monsters Unleashed. Sadly, however, if you buy the double 2-pack with the Monsters Unleashed, Monster Unleashed is on the same disc as this movie, which means all of the special features from both movies are eliminated from the DVD. There's not even a scene select. And it's just weird. Like you have to like just skip through like certain parts manually and everything. And I really do miss the special effects because I remember I had like fun watching those and listening to the commentary and stuff like that. Speaking of which, originally I was gonna make this video about like a year ago. And like I'm glad I didn't because earlier this year I saw an interview with Freddie Prinze Jr. who played Fred. And he talked about how like it wasn't necessarily the best experience he had working on that. He got the ride, I think an ATV, I believe, or something like that, but I think it crashed or something like that. And it was something he said about that. So I'm not really sure. But he did say how he was mistreated by that of the WB. Around this time, another WB movie was getting made. And those people who worked on the movie got a bunch of perks, like a new car and all kind of stuff, right? And this is what you get when you work in like Hollywood. They give you perks, TVs, movies, like all kind of crap, especially more money and stuff. Well, this is how it was. I remember like, and I knew about stuff like that because of the Survivor reality show. So you know how on reality shows they say the first prize, the person who wins the show get the first prize. The second person who's runner up gets like a half the prize, and then everybody else gets nothing. That's not true because when you appear on TV, everybody has to get paid no matter what. So this is why people on reality shows try to stay on shows longer, like Dancing with the Stars, even though they know they can't dance, because they get paid per episode that they're on. Plus they get an extra bonus if they get to a certain round. Also on Survivor, I read that everybody got like cars and stuff. I'm like, wait, hold up, but they're the losers though. So him and the rest of the crew was expecting like perks. And you know what they gave them? Scooby snacks. I kid you not. That was their perk. They got a big old thing of Scooby snacks. No cars, no extra bonus, no nothing. He said they felt disrespected and everything. And, you know, it's quite a shame how these movie studios play, like, you know, pranks on people. And I bet you anything James Gunn has something to do with it, because it's James Gunn. You can't trust beady eyes. Speaking of James Gunn, apparently he wrote this movie more raunchy than what we saw. Now in this movie, yes, we did get some adult humor. And we did get some a weed reference and stuff. Because I never knew about this stuff and like, you know, when watching it as a kid. It wasn't until I was in college around this year that like I went to this old coffee shop and I met a bunch of people. Two of them I became friends with, and they were talking about Scooby-Doo. And so like talking about how like, oh, we believe Shaggy and Scooby were constantly getting high. They got like the munchies and this and that. They believe Fred was banging both well, mostly Daphne, but sometimes Velma too, because he always wanted to like split up with that of like Daphne. And so those references made it into the movie. Daphne and Fred are not a couple, and they don't act like they like each other, but then at the end of the movie, for whatever reason, they start kissing and stuff. And so, but he always wants to split up, and he always wants to go with Daphne, and Velma's all like, oh, that's typical. And so those references made it in there, especially like the weed thing with Mary Jane, the actress played by Fisher, or the character played by Fisher. But apparently there was supposed to be more R-rated. There were more adult humor in there. There was more raunchy jokes. There was like Shaggy was actually supposed to be a stoner. There was a kiss between that of Daphne and Velma. They were supposed to hint more towards Velma being more like a lesbian and stuff. There was a really raunchy scene with Fred, and he does something with Daphne, like on a date or something like that. And the monsters were actually more gruesome looking and scarier looking and stuff. Also, there was way more cleavage shown, and that had to be CGI. I never knew what I knew there was cleavage in the movie I saw, but I didn't know it was CGI. And so, like with clothes filling it and stuff. And also, there was a dance scene with Velma in an orange bikini, but parents mistake that for underwear. So it had to be toned down. And I remember when watching the movie, I remember the adult references and the weed reference and stuff. And I remember thinking the monsters, while their design looks okay, the CGI looks terrible on them. And this is because of the test audience. Parents did not like that. They didn't want their kids watching that version of Scooby-Doo. And the thing is, like, yeah, I get it. Lots of kids, they find the old Scooby Doo stuff and, like, they watch it because, Cartoon Network's always repeating it. But every Scooby Doo fan was, like, a grown adult by that time. So, yeah, there were kids watching it, but they were still adults. I would love to see the R-rated version, but nobody has seen it. It's, like, locked away in, like, a vault, and it's never supposed to come out. Not even clips of it have like surfaced on like YouTube or nothing like that. But I am still happy with the version we got. And I do understand the hesitation from that R rating because it was too James Gunnish, which makes me worry for Superman Legacy. Is this man gonna go overboard, or is he gonna be like faithful to like, Superman? Only time will tell. And so, like, and it makes you now wonder, it's kind of like, if they didn't want all that in, then why the heck is Velma out on, like, HBO Max? Because Minda Kaling went, like, nuts with that show and everything, but they left Scooby-Doo out for that reason. And so, yeah. Now, one thing I always found odd and both interesting at the same time was the choices made for this movie. It's set in the modern day. They don't necessarily give a year, but you can tell that it's set around the early 2000s because of the cell phones that's out. We only see one cell phone in the movie, and Mary Jane is the one who uses it. Mystery Inc., they actually don't use no modern technology. They don't use cell phones. They don't use computers or anything like that. In fact, their characters are still dressed in like their 80s clothes, which is very odd and unusual. I get it. They wanted to go for that classic look. But it does seem odd that they're the only ones dressed in like the 80s and everybody else is dressed in the 2000s. And Velma is still wearing that like really over the top sweater, and they're in the middle of May. And they're out for like summer vacation or spring break or something like that, he said. I don't know, it's weird. He said, one dude said it's the middle of May, but I could have sworn another character said, they're out for spring break. Don't make no sense if it's in May, because spring break is not in May. At least I don't remember it being in May. Is it? No, it's not. So I don't understand that part. Anyway, but she's wearing that hot sweater throughout the entirety of the movie. Now, what's even more odd and interesting is that only Daphne and Fred are allowed to modify their outfits and everything. Like in the beginning of the movie, they wear all their classic outfits from like the cartoon. But then when, certain years have passed and they reunite, only Daphne and Fred have been modified and everything. They're not wearing, like, he's not wearing white, he's wearing blue. And she's wearing like, different purple like outfits and stuff. Whereas only Velma and Shaggy are the only ones wearing their iconic outfits throughout the entirety of the movie. The only time they change is when Shaggy is in the van eating a eggplant burger, and like he's wearing like a tank top and everything, but he's still wearing his brown pants. And the only time Velma changes up is when she gets possessed and she's wearing like a shorter modified outfit that she will start to wear in newer cartoons and everything. But other than that, then they revert back to their regular clothes, which is really odd. And I'm thinking to myself, it must have been mandated. Like it had to have been mandated. Because when you think of Scooby-Doo, you think of Scooby and you think of Shaggy. And so Warner Brothers probably didn't want his outfit changed. Because, oh wait, he also wears a jacket at one point in time when he's at the airport, but that's about it. And so because with Bruce Timm, who does all the Batman DC stuff, the cartoon stuff for Justice League, they told him, you can redesign anybody in the show you want except for the big three, Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. When the Batman cartoon series came out, everybody had a redesign except for Batman. The only thing that was changed was his logo. And that's because they don't want certain people like changed and modified. So I'm thinking Shaggy got that treatment. He wasn't allowed to be modified. But why Velma? Velma is the least liked out of everybody in the Scooby-Doo franchise. I've never seen people really gravitate towards her. Maybe she has a bigger fan following than I thought. And as for the kiss that they were supposed to have, they do have her end up with a guy in both movies, which we've seen her like guys in the newer cartoon series, but they have recently started making her a lesbian character. Apparently, she's always been like a lesbian icon and stuff. I never saw it. Like, just because she's dressed like a nerd and has glasses, I never got that distinction. But they said because she's so strong and can lift the entire group up and, run with them and all stuff, that's like lesbian strength or something like that people have been saying on the internet. Whatever. I just saw her as a nerd. So if she has a huge fan base, it must be for the LGBT. And so this must have been kept in secret, and that's probably why they didn't want her outfit modified. But then there's Fred. Like, most people don't really like Fred. He's just kind of there. But everybody crushed on like Daphne. So I'm surprised she was given like a makeover and stuff. So with this movie, we get a classic opening where the gang is like, trying to stop like a ghost like monster type thing. It's a person in a mask. So I love how they went with that. And like always, they spring a trap, but then Shaggy like screws everything up. And Scooby has to like save the day and all this other stuff. And so they reveal the Lunar Ghost, which was a made up character for the movie. And so, like, we get a cameo from that of Pamela Anderson. I cannot stand her no more. She is just scum. Because, like, I was cool with her until she became obsessed with this very dangerous criminal of a man, which she's tried to have 2 sitting presidents pardon this man for all his international crimes and espionage type stuff. And when I say this man is terrible, like he's worse than Tommy Lee. Tommy Lee might have hit her, but this man has committed international crimes and stuff. And he is the lowest of the low and the enemy of the state. And for whatever reason, she is crazy obsessed with him. That woman loves her bad boys, I swear. Anyways. So, there's actually an alternate opening in the original DVD, which is more classic and animated like that of the show. So anyways, after Fred takes credit for like capturing the Lunar Ghost and it being his trap, but it was actually Velma's trap, she gets pissed and all like, she quits. And then Daphne, who's all like, now why did you quit? Like, maybe I want to quit. And now they're going to say, I'm copying off of you. Like, she has this spoiled brat demeanor, Daphne does, similar to that of a pup named Scooby-Doo. So she quits. Then Fred wants to quit, which only leaves Shaggy and Scooby, who tries to keep them together, but they don't want to stay together. And when they walk off, it's kind of like, dude, Shaggy is the one in the mystery van. How y'all going to get home just walking home? And then, of course, we get to see this at nighttime after this. Years have passed, and there's a man by the name of Emil Mondavarius. He has an island called like Spooky Island, and he wants the gang to reunite and solve this big mystery and stuff. They meet up at the airport and they're very shocked to see each other 'cause they haven't seen each other in years. And since that time, they've changed. Fred wrote a book. Velma works for NASA, and Daphne has discovered herself and learned martial arts. And so, like, just like that, they're able to get back together, but it takes a good while. And so, when they're on the island and everything, this is when like Emil tells them that he thinks something has happened to these like college students. They're well behaved and mannered and stuff like this. And every person who comes there is wild and crazy, but when they leave, they're well mannered, they're like walking up straight, and they're talking in ghetto slang. Like one girl's all like, "Get off my grill, son," or something like that. And it's just weird hearing all these white people talking ghetto slang in their corny sounding voices. They made it sound even cornier. Speaking of which, this movie is extremely white. Like, there's nothing but a white cast. There's only one black guy, and he's recurring, but he's very limited to the movie. There are like at least 4 or 5 background characters that are black, but they're pushed way in the background to where you can't see them. This movie is very white and very skinny. And that's early Hollywood for you. And so, they're all not really together yet. They're all like, I'm going to solve this mystery first. And so they all go their own separate ways on the island trying to figure stuff out. Well, they're later reunited on the island when it turns out that the monster people are not people in masks. They're actual real monsters and stuff. And so this causes a lot of chaos on the island, and it causes them to work together. So we get a stupid fart joke in the entirety of the movie that lasts for like a whole minute. Scooby and Shaggy just farting. James Gunn, I swear, you think this would have been Nickelodeon or something. And so, like, a lot of craziness happens. They get chased around. It feels like classic Scooby-Doo stuff, except for they're not running. It's not a hallway, and they're not running through the doors in that classic fashion. I think you'll see that in the Cartoon Network movies, I believe. And so, meant to talk about the music. The music is awesome. I love the soundtrack for this movie. It's poppy and like catchy and everything. It was music of that time, very early 2000s, which I'm okay with. Because the thing about Scooby-Doo is that whatever time period you're in, it takes music cues from that time period. So it's appropriate for them to take music cues from like, this era and stuff. We get a flashback scene with their classic like costumes, and we get Scrappy-Doo, which I was always a Scrappy-Doo fan. He was targeted to my audience and everything. People hate Scrappy for some bizarre reason. But then it's revealed he's not a puppy, he's actually an adult with a gland disorder. So he's basically a dwarf. And because they made him look older in this movie and stuff, and I did not like that. I wanted that like clean cut puppy look, And I hate that they made him an adult, but it would have made sense after all these years, So anyways, there's like this MacGuffin and everything, and like, it basically still show protoplasm and everything. You're basically a floating head. And the CGI on that is really good. The one on Linda is not really all that good. She didn't get that many facial expressions because, Velma doesn't do that. Fred, a little bit more better, but Daphne from Sarah, oh my God, it was like perfect, man. It looked just like her, it acted just like her and everything. And I keep mentioning Mary Jane and Fisher, but like, I haven't mentioned, she's the love interest for Shaggy in this movie. Her name is Mary Jane. And basically she's just like, a person on vacation, and she meets Shaggy. And she was really like a cool addition to like this movie and stuff. Because we never seen Shaggy have like a love interest, not until the newer cartoons. And the actress talked about how she loved being in this movie because she loved watching the cartoons growing up. Sadly, however, she's not in the sequel movie. And also, Velma gets a love interest in some random guy she meets. I don't even remember his name, but he's not in the sequel either. And so, like, we get this really cool scene with the floating heads, and they going into each other's bodies. And, like, this is when we get the switcheroo thing where everybody's, like, having to lip sync everybody else's voice. And they do a really good job. Some of the voices don't match up with the mouth movements, but other times they do. Fred, on the other hand, because it's James Gunn, decides to get perverted and be all like, hey, I can look at myself naked. And then he pulls open his shirt and looks at like Daphne's chest. It was funny at that time, but now it just seems perverted and it just seems like James Gunn being James Gunn. So it makes you wonder how more raunchier that scene was and everything. And so they start swapping bodies, but then they come back. And so they figure out, like, the plan and everything when they decipher the MacGuffin and they talk to that voodoo man and everything. And basically, they feel like, somebody wants to unleash this god, and it's the person who brought them there. So it's Emil. But why is Emil evil and everything? And they need a pure, like, soul, but it doesn't have to be human. They want Scooby-Doo because Scooby-Doo is, like, pure of heart. So it's revealed later on that Emil's actually a person in a mask. It's actually Scrappy-Doo with a robotic body. He's the one who lured them there because they kicked him out of the group back in the day. And he's been pissed at them ever since and wants to take over the world. So he becomes like an uber monster looking thing and he tries to destroy them all. So they end up saving the day and he shrinks back down to size and gets like arrested. And then the real Emil shows up with a bushy beard and hair because he was taken hostage. And so like they decide they're gonna stick together and give each other the respect that they need. And then like it just ends with like Scooby and Shaggy just eating like they always do. It's a really fun movie. It's bright, it's colorful, it's vibrant, it has a nice soundtrack. It is like a classic and everything. And it made enough money to get like that of a sequel. It had a budget of 84 million, but it made 275.7 million and everything. That wasn't that spooky. Alright, well, I shall talk to y'all later. Bye.